So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
The First Lady of New York Radio, Joan Hamburg. Entertaining and informative. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
I'm very happy to introduce you or reintroduce you all to a terrific journalist, and I know you've known Betty Rollin over the years, a former NBC correspondent. Betty has written many books. The memoirs First You Cry, that actually was a television movie with Mary Tyler Moore. And Last Wish, Betty's involved in some very important groups, End of Life Choices, Compassion and Choices. And, it's interesting because Betty writes many things and does incredibly well as a journalist, but she recently had a piece called How to Talk to a Widow in the Times, and everyone was talking about this piece. Were you prepared, Betty Rollin, for the reaction to this? You write important pieces all the time, and this touched a responsive chord, and people were talking about this everywhere, including me.
I was not prepared. How can you be prepared when there's so much going on in the world and in New York? And, I just wrote about what was happening to me in life because I figured it was happening to other people, and that's what my books are like that too. And I just can't believe the reaction I'm getting to this piece. It's overwhelming because when I wrote books and got reactions, 2 of them were movies. That was very nice. But the technology wasn't what it is today. So I've got about 400 emails that I really feel I want to answer. Not to mention, and now it's apparently been published all over the world in the International Times. So I'm kind of overwhelmed, and the letters are so moving. And they're from widows, and they're from widowers, and they're from people I went to grade school with, and they're from, people I don't know but should know. And I'm about to be 87, and I did not expect this kind of, excitement, really. And
because I lost my husband during the worst part of COVID, and there are.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Betty. There are statistics that you gave out. 11.4 million widows in society today, and 3.4 widowers. So it's a huge statistic, and there are things that one rarely thinks about or doesn't until it happens to you.
This is right? True. This is true. And who was even aware of widows? I certainly wasn't until I was one. Right. And there are many. I certainly didn't realize how many more widows there were than widowers. And when we were young, the deal was you married an older man because he would take care of you, and exactly. Because that's how it was. That's just how life was then. And I'm happy to say that's changing. That has changed, I would say. And so I think there won't be so many widows in the future, but that is, those numbers are going to change because everybody's going to be about the same age. But it's astonishing how many of us there are, and how lonely a lot of us are, and how poor some widows are.
Well, that's very interesting, that widows are more likely than married women to be poor.
Absolutely.
Did that surprise you in doing your research?
That did not surprise me. It's not my own situation, just fortunately, because I sold books and movies.
Right, and you're a career woman.
And I am a career woman, and also we didn't have children, and for several reasons having to do with breast cancer and other things, and being old when we married. But if you don't have children, you probably have more money than people who have children. I mean, that's just a fact.
Uh-huh.
So that isn't a reason not to have children, but it's just a fact. So, I'm not in a bad situation that way, but many widows are in a bad situation that way. For sure.
Right, and they don't remarry as often as men. And you point that out, that if a man is left alone, there's a good chance he'll remarry, and often marry younger women.
And marry quickly.
So,
remarry quickly,
yes.
I should say. Yeah, I mean, that's what men do, and that's what men can do much more easily than women. They can just start looking around again, and that's of course harder for women to do even today. I mean, I'm glad that something that never existed when we were young exists now, which is these, I don't know what they're called exactly, but where you do a profile of yourself and I don't know. It's funny. I don't know the word for that category of thing, but where you can meet somebody online, and sometimes that works.
Very popular.
That works. That can help. That helps. I think it's better than nothing, because women are not invited to parties, especially. And anyway, today there are no more parties that
exactly,
because of the
different
COVID
from when we came of age. It was very different. There was a lot more entertaining, a lot of parties, our lives were very, very different.
Certainly.
And you point out that you married late in life, or what would be considered today, it wouldn't be so late. You were 43 when you married Ed, right? Today it was like a mere slip of a girl.
Yeah, well, it's true. It wasn't so odd. I mean, I had been very briefly married before, but then I got cancer and thought I may not live long, so I'm going to get out of this marriage, which wasn't too great. Yeah. And so, yes, my marriage to Ed, I wasn't even expecting at all what I got. I mean, what I got was just something wonderful from this man who we were so very different. But it was just a great, lovely, marriage that was just I don't know what to call it. It was a surprise is what it was, because my expectations about my relationships with men up to that point hadn't been that great, and this guy turned out to be just wonderful. My mother agreed.
Well, that was a big deal, and he wasn't in your world.
Not at all.
He was a math person, a mathematician.
Yes.
From the Midwest,
and a brilliant one.
You were, but you were Miss New York.
I was and another thing I was couldn't have been worse at math, and had always been. And so he wrote books that I couldn't read, that nobody I knew could read. Yeah, and that was, and he told me at the beginning, don't worry about it. We'll talk about other things, which is what we did. And
he was a very unusual man, because you had many, many terrific years together. But when he ended up getting sick, he really seized the moment. We're going to take whatever time we have and try to be as happy as we can.
And that's exactly what he said to me when we walked home from the doctor. And it turns out they had missed a cancer that was there. And so it was extra awful that he was about. They gave him. They tell you very straight nowadays. They said 2 years, which turned out to be exactly right. And he just said, let's not be angry. Let's be as happy as we can. And Ed was just the kind of person who could pull that off, and much better than I. I mean, I was acting a bit during the 2 years, but he wrote a math book as he was dying, which has just been published. I mean, who does that? So this was an unusual guy, and it made him all the harder to lose.
And you said, or I think I read it, that you have no right to sadness and no right to misery. And I think it was because obviously you look around and we live in this complicated world today. But
yes,
you do have a right to sadness in my terms. You had a very good life together, an important life, and when that's taken away, even the best adjusted person, it's incredibly painful, and it is sad because you've lost a piece of yourself.
Well, Joan, it's sad, but after all, I'm old, and this happens to people who are far younger, and it happens to people who have had far less good lives, and it happens to people who are in terrible straits, which I'm not. I have wonderful friends. I mean, some of them kind of disappeared, but most of them did not. And I consider myself lucky. I don't feel lucky. I have to be honest. I mean, nothing is really going to make me happy, in quotes, anymore.
Well,
but
at this
I do
moment,
feel,
you don't know, really.
Well, I guess not. It's been a while, though, and I mean, that's the price paid for losing something that was that wonderful. But I don't for a minute feel sorry for myself. How could I feel sorry for myself? I used to be a news correspondent, and so I watch the news a lot.
Yeah, a lot of bad stuff.
Oh, my. I mean, how people are suffering. Am I going to complain about being a widow at my age, or given what I had and what I still have? So I don't feel sorry for myself, but that doesn't mean I don't feel sorry for a lot of other widows, and I do, because the world is not kind to widows, especially. And even sometimes, I mean, a big difference is not having children, of course, but the children aren't always around.
They live in different places.
And they're not always, great
devoted
children to their mothers at this stage of life. And so that certainly in most cases makes it at least a bit easier, though. But that wasn't my situation.
When you lost Ed, and as the time went by, were you lonely, or did you pick up as best you could your life?
That's an awfully good question. Lonely hit me right away, because we were such friends, my husband and I. We were talking to each other all the time, except when he was doing mathematics, of course, which was sacred time. I would never dare say a word while he was sitting in there doing his numbers. But otherwise, he was my everything. I mean, in terms of the person closest to me in my life. So, yeah, I felt lonely kind of right away. And that hasn't really gone away, even though my friends are wonderful, and even though I continue to see my friends. I'm in the middle of New York. They're nearby. And I Zoom. I'm crazy about Zoom as a way of just getting together with people. Nobody. I don't know anybody who does that, but me. It just have, I have, in a sense, and Ed and I were doing that while he was dying. We had dinner with people without dinner. In other words, we'd Zoom, and there'd be just the four of us, and now it's the three of us, and we have a wonderful conversation. And the hour's up, and then we go off to our dinners. But it's been an intimate meeting, unlike Zoom. People usually think of big meetings, but these are get-togethers, and yeah, I love it.
and just use it. So it's what I hear from my friends who are alone is that the loneliness is what gets to them. I mean, you live in New York if you do live in New York, and there's something every minute if you want to go for it.
Yeah, but who wants to go for something every minute anymore? I mean, first of all, it's still scary, and there are a lot of people who've removed their masks, which they shouldn't, and which I certainly haven't done. You have to be careful. And anyway, probably you don't feel all that great to want to be hopping around. I'm quite lucky. I'm about to be 87, and I don't have too many diseases, but I have a few. I have arthritis and this and that and the other thing.
Normal, right?
And that keeps you from being too social. And so there's a loneliness. And as I say, I was particularly chatty with my husband, and I miss his conversation, which was great, and he was also funny, which I loved. I mean, we laughed a lot. I miss that.
And that's a gift. Do people ask you after he had been gone for a couple of months or a year whether you're interested in meeting other men?
They were smart enough not to do that. I mean, they have done that, and it's now 2 years, a little over. So I've had some of that recently, but not much of it. I think they get it that that is not where I'm headed, and I mean, the problem was, if my husband were not such a great guy, maybe I'd feel differently, but I don't see anybody around who in any way could, and I don't want to get involved with some guy and then be, grouchy because he's not as nice as my husband who died. Nice isn't the word, but I'm sure you won't get what I'm talking about. And so, no, but I certainly think that's a great thing to do if you can find somebody else who is a great person and who you want to spend what's left of your life with. Wonderful. I mean, what a good thing to do. But not many women do that.
No, or even want to do that.
Or even want to. I think there are many who do want to, but who can't, and who just don't do it. It's not available to them. But as I say, these ways of meeting people, I think that's great for everybody who wants to do that.
Yeah, they can go online today, and I know people who have met people just by doing that.
Absolutely,
if that's what they choose. I love when you wrote. I'm talking to Betty Rollin, who wrote a piece recently in the Times about being a widow. But I love when you talk about how your Christian friends, after Ed passed away, send flowers. Your Jewish friends send food. Food is better. And I got a kick out of that.
That's my closing line. I mean, I must say, that's everybody's favorite line. And I have to tell you, Joan, a hilarious thing that happened 2 days ago is that a Christian couple sent me a huge box of food.
Friends?
friends
right.
sent me a huge box. It's embarrassing, from Harry and David, with so much food, enough for. I mean, remember, I'm alone, so I've been giving it away. But it was very funny of them to do that. I mean, they're given that they're Christian, and I just insulted them by saying they sent flowers, and they wanted it to be known that we're Christians, but we're here, we're sending you food.
That's funny.
It was very
I
funny.
know, and very welcome. Well, I
sure.
think you've got another book because of the great interest in this. I'm telling you, I know more people who are widowed now. I never thought about it till it happened to me, and then I looked around, and there are groups of women everywhere.
It's true, and they're sad, and they're sadder than they need to be. Then they're sadder than they should be, and I wouldn't have especially noticed. Although, something, I think I did notice. I feel that I was good to my widow friends because I had been alone a lot in my life. I mean, I hadn't married even the first time till I was 36, and then that was brief, and then again. But, I understand what it feels like to be alone, and I like to think that I paid more attention to my widow friends. Yeah, but no, I'm happy. I wrote that, and it was. I mean, the Times wasn't really. I certainly didn't expect them to make, place it so wonderfully and all of that. And I've just heard from. I'm just overwhelmed by the reaction, really.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was a really important piece, and it gave us all food for thought, and people have been talking about it. So I'm telling you, there's your next book, unless you're already working on something.
No,
because, you're independent. You've always lived your life, even with a very good marriage. And there are a lot of people who live as a wife, even today. And when that's taken away, it's like floundering in deep water and you don't know how to swim.
True.
And it's you have to learn it, which sounds very hard, but it's definitely part of the learning process. And as you point out, you've got to pick yourself up in many ways and try to make the sadness go away and live your life.
Absolutely. You have to be a good sport about it, whether you feel like a good sport or not. I mean, you really do. Just for your own survival in the world that you're now living in without that husband. You have to do it. And, we all try our best, but we falter. And we need our friends to stick with us, without... they have their lives and they have their problems. And I think that's very important for widows to realize that our friends, if they're not being perfect friends, are going through something too, because we're all going through something nowadays. Right. It's a really kind of a sad moment in our history, but we have to be even nicer to each other, I think, than we may feel like being.
Right. And be there. And another one, just the other night at dinner, it said to me, if you're home alone, and I don't want to go out every single night, it's a little much. And she said, I find that if I'm home alone, I don't eat.
Oh.
And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, I'll pick at something, or if there are cookies in the house, I'll have cookies, but I don't make myself a dinner.
Uh-oh.
Where we always sat down at the table and had dinner. And one of the things I did if I'm home, I have a dinner and I make myself sit down at a table, and set the table with napkins, the whole bit, and eat the dinner.
Me too. That's a very sensible thing to do. It's important, of course, for all the obvious reasons. But yes, and what I also do, I mean, this is questionable, this part of it, but I do watch the news while I'm eating, which isn't really probably a great idea, but it's better than a soundless room.
No, I agree.
If nobody's there. And no, I mean, we do the best we can, but we need to be recognized as kind of a larger group, and than people realized. So I'm glad I made some noise about it.
All right. Well, you did good, and I look forward to the next good. Thank you, Betty. I appreciate your taking the time.
Oh, thank you, Joan, for giving me the time.
Anytime. Betty Rollin, a former NBC News correspondent. Betty's written many books, including First You Cry, actually a big television movie with Mary Tyler Moore, and Last Wish. Thank you guys for sharing Betty. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WABC.